Oh man, okay, so where am I at? I was piecing together some really cool stuff. I keep thinking about the who is worthy, and no man in heaven or earth or down below was worthy, and I wept greatly. This is Revelation chapter 5. I'm like, it's kind of narcissistic to be like, oh yeah, well, I'm worthy or whatever. Yeah, I lost everything, I did all that shit, but other people have done that too. And it's, what does who is worthy mean? And if we look at the Revelation 12 sign that happened on the day I decided to formally make Truth Rabbit, of my own free will, I decided to make that movie, or that documentary from my iPhone footage like you're seeing now. And I had no idea that God was powering everything. I was just like, yeah, there's probably meaning behind all these weird coincidences that are happening. A week after it blows up with Natasha, I meet, the reason I got hooked on her was because of a comment about Michael Mann's cinematography, my favorite cinematography in the world. And a week later, I meet the nephew of Michael Mann's cinematographer, right? It's a coincidence. I'm like, oh yeah. And from there, weird shit started to happen. Wind up in New York, and I step out of a cab, and I look, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is where I met Natasha 60 days prior. And then I'm like on the phone with my ex-wife, ending my marriage a couple days before it was, over. And I describe this in the book. But I'm like, the other phone line rings, and this is Natasha. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, I'm going up to meet Michael Mann's cinematographer's nephew. Like, I'm outside of his apartment in Brooklyn. And I'm like, I hung up the phone with my soon-to-be ex-wife. And I'm like on the phone with Natasha. And I'm like, wait a minute. As I hung up, I'm like, okay, I was on the phone with you at the beginning of my marriage, and now I'm on the phone with you at the end of my marriage. This is a fucking weird coincidence. Then I'm going up to see Michael Mann's cinematographer's nephew to snort cocaine. All right, so here's my point. All these coincidences are happening, and I think about this, a year and a half later, almost 2 years later, who is worthy? And it's like, I get it. With the Revelation 12 sign, I voluntarily decided to move forward and make Truth Rabbit before it had a God angle approach, or as part of it. And I decided to do that. But because there's a God, and God wants to have the kingdom of God, or the Millennial Kingdom, the Messianic Era, take place, he marked that day with a celestial formation in the sky, a once in a 10,000 year celestial formation, to show that even though it was my free will to make a movie that ultimately turns out to prove the existence of God in a way that only two other people have fucking done, Moses and Jesus, in the past 3,300 years, he marks that day. It's my decision to make the movie, but he had already planned around it. So important it was from, God's standpoint. Here's my point. He must have known that my brain would be like, yeah, I'm going to make that movie today, so far in advance that he was able to plan the whole fucking, not just world events, but also, celestial formations around it to show that he can see in the future, that he's omniscient. That's the importance of the Revelation 12 sign. Is that, yes, he knew it was going to happen, and he had control to kind of put some things around that day to signify, yes, James is the guy. More importantly, the sign attaches to the chapter Revelation 12, which if you look at it, it's a play-by-play of the first 7 years of my life. I'm the kid who died because I died when I was a baby. There was a war in heaven, and the heaven represents, this storyline, right? And like this psychological zone, which you can learn how to, adopt or whatever in the book that I wrote, which is online. But my point is, it goes through everything. He talks about my brother being tormented by, or, the dragon is tormenting him. It was basically my brother had some issues like when he was 8. when I was 7, he was 8. There's two 1,260-day periods. The point is, the sign matches to me. So something written fucking 2,000 years ago by John of Patmos matches to my fucking first 7 years of my life. The same kid who grows up to make a movie for a girl that the celestial formation forms, related to that chapter, on the same day I decided to make the movie. Here's my point. He's like confirming, he's like, that's it, like, that's the guy. Now, what makes me worthy? He must have been, since he can see in the future, he's running permutations on every human being. Okay? Like, not just me, but you and you and you and you. And for 2,000 years, God needed someone to, be able to, sketch out his Millennial Kingdom, which is basically just an economic system, right? And also solves for how he works, we can see in the future, all that stuff, with evidence, i.e. you got to record the whole fucking thing, whether it's on video or you write it down or whatever. You have to document it like Moses did or like the apostles did for Jesus, via the Gospels. But no one was worthy. He sat there and he's like, okay, let's try, Abib, fucking Rahman or whatever. Nope, doesn't work. Okay, and he can throw coincidences at Abib all day, but Abib is probably like, well, yeah, it's just a coincidence. I don't know, like whatever. Me, I'm like, that's fucking something's there. Like, keep going, and then eventually piece together. That's God. Like, all coincidences are God. Okay, and then what is this in Revelation? And then now it's a fucking economic plan. And sketch that out. Write the book. It takes me fucking 1.5 years, but I get it done. And no one else fucking got it done in 2,000 years. And he needed someone on earth, like in our reality, to fucking do this. And no one was worthy. Think about that. Like, he must have run permutation after permutation. It says in Revelation chapter 5, and no man in heaven or earth or down below. That means no man in like the psychological euphoria, which is hyper-religiosity, which you can read about in my book. It's like basically euphoria. Or on earth, like where, we're like our own gods and, data's king, science and all that. And I'm not discounting any of that stuff. What I'm saying is it's like a real scientific mindset. That's earth. And then the hell below is like, people who are in like a mental hell. But any of those three zones, no one was worthy is what they're saying. And, John of Patmos, as he writes down in Revelation chapter 5, he's like, and I wept. He's like, I wept greatly. Like, no man was worthy. From fucking 1st century AD to the 21st century, no man was worthy as God's running fucking permutations. He's like, nope, nope. Imagine sitting there with all the people who've ever been alive, let's say 100 billion people in that 2,000 year period, and you're sitting there and everyone fucking fails. And God would have thrown anything to catch your attention as a unit on the board. For me, he's like, all right, so it blows up with Natasha. All right, this kid loves Michael Mann. He loves the cinematography. He got hooked on this girl because of that. I'm going to introduce him to Michael Mann, the cinematographer, within 7 days of it blowing up with the girl. And she's the incentive to keep him on, on the track, like, on the hunt. And then, all the other stuff which I write about in the book. But think about this. He's running permutations like, well, when I say permutation, I don't just mean he gives it one shot for you. He tries it. He's like, okay, well, maybe if I do it, okay, let me, his favorite artist is Drake. So let me just introduce him to Drake's, like, whatever, and then see if he can take the next step, and then I'll introduce him to so-and-so, and then bam, bam, bam. And eventually you would have wound up to Revelation, and eventually you would have sketched out a fucking economic system, but it didn't work with you. And then you try your brother, and then no, okay, let me no, and you got to have, because you have to here's the thing, you have to satisfy. God had to satisfy every prophetic requirement, not just some of them, all of them. And he can handle like, oh, you need to be a Leo, like a lion, or something about a lion with you, or you have to be on a white horse. He can do all that shit, but you had to take the next step, and no man was worthy. Or woman, I guess it had to be man, because it was all like fucking male-centered back then, which sucks for, chicks or whatever. But when I think about that concept, I'm like, wow. So I probably should include all that in my book. he would have given you everything. So for me, it was like coincidence, like, oh, that's weird. And then another coincidence, I was like, that's weird. Another coincidence, that's weird. And then I'm like, what the fuck are these coincidences? Look them up. Okay, well, they're either totally random or they're God. Okay, well, let's take the God approach. He planned that. He planned for the Jewish girl that I fell in love with. He planned for her to be a fucking atheist so I would go the God route. That was a decision to make. And he's like, one of the permutations was like, okay, now I got to this fork in the road. So now I've got to like get this guy who he's ready to fucking go on this wild journey. He doesn't know he's going to go on the journey, but I'm going to take him on the journey. But I need him to go the God route versus the fucking atheist route. Okay, well, make sure he dies. Kill the girl so she dies when she's younger. And he thinks about that when she mentions she's an atheist. So then he goes the God route. You see, he's like the fucking puppeteer. Now me, I had no clue when I was going through this journey. I'm just like, well, that's weird, or, you know, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, he found a fucking solution here. And for you, that means that moving forward, you have to understand, I'm just the template. You can now be the fucking, you can be the unit on the fucking crazy ass journey to go in, I don't know, whatever he's got in store for you. I have no clue. And you don't know either. So you got to stay open-minded on your journey. But I'm telling you, he has run permutations on your whole life. And he knows what to drop in your path to lead you. But you have to take the step. Just like I took the step to make the movie. Just like I took the step to go. And he knew I was going to do that, but he had to throw everything in the kitchen sink. He didn't just give me those coincidences. He gave me a pixelation, which I recorded and is online. He gave me a pixelation of my vision, along with it's Moses' burning bush. I got a burning bathroom, meaning both of our visions pixelated for 90 seconds. And when Moses said, why, he's like, when he saw the burning bush, then the Lord spoke and said, I am that I am, or whatever the wording was. Basically, Moses was saying, he's like, the Lord said, I'm here, I exist. When I got the burning bathroom with the pixelation on March 13th of last year, that's basically what he says. He's like, boom, I exist. That's all I know is that something fucking insane happened for 90 seconds that confirmed that God exists and said, all I got was pixelation in every sense of my body activated except my auditory. At the exact moment I thought, oh, we're all alone in the universe. He was like, boop, confirmed. Meaning, I'm here now. Don't ever forget that you're all alone in the universe. And I can respond at the exact moment you have a thought. That's it. And then everything else got pieced together from the Bible. But my point is, he had to throw that pixelation. He had to throw the girl. He had to have the girl taken away. He had to have all the crazy fucking coincidences, which I documented in the book. He had to have all the prophecy, which I fulfilled, plus the celestial alignment, right? Plus the fucking UN report that says, well, the end of the world and blah, blah, blah. All that shit had to happen to fulfill prophecy. So he could have some guy walk down a fucking path and then ultimately write a book and connect all this fucking prophetic stuff. And then he had to arrange for climate change. So it'll be a clock for the end of the world. That's Jesus' equivalent of being like, this is Revelation chapter 1. I am he who's alive, or I was dead and I'm alive, and I have the keys to hell and death. He's like, I can just imagine him shaking. He's like, I got the keys to hell and death. Who's worthy? Come on, who can do this? Who can follow every fucking coincidence and never back down and just say, there's meaning here, I'm going to keep going, until you ultimately fucking sketched out a global peace deal with an economic system, which isn't directed by me or any other human being, it's directed by God. It's a theocracy, but there's not like a dude or a king. There's God. It's God and then every other human, and then all human beings. You see, there's one master-in-chief. What do you call him? Commander-in-chief. But anyway, who was worthy? And no man was worthy, and I wept greatly. No man in heaven or earth or down below, and I wept greatly. And one of the elders said, weep fucking not. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David.